For more than 50 years, Outreach LGBTQ+ Community Center has proudly served the greater Madison community, working to advance equity and improve quality of life for LGBTQ+ people through community building, health and human services, and advocacy. Join Outreach at Magic Pride Festival on Sunday, August 16th at Warner Park for a day of entertainment, family activities, vendors, and community celebration. We can't wait to celebrate with you. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about.
Good morning, Madison. It is Wednesday, and primary election results are officially in. I'm CityCast Madison executive producer Hayley Sperling, filling in for your host, Bianca Martin, and joining me now is newsletter editor Rob Thomas. Hello, Rob. Happy 4 a.m.
Yes, the Democratic voters of Wisconsin may be divided, but they are united in that they did not want Hayley and Rob to have a good night's sleep.
That is so real. Are you ready to talk about these results?
Yeah, we love this stuff. This is where reporters really shine.
The only thing missing is I didn't have any pizza last night.
I know, I kind of craved it. Yeah, but I needed pizza that had been sitting out for several hours. That's the newsroom way, right?
That really is. That's the only thing that journalists know is cover election, eat pizza. All right, well, let's not keep the people waiting too much longer. Let's dive right into it. The first race that we are going to get into is the race with obviously the most eyes on it, the Democratic bid for Wisconsin governor. And this race has been the talk of the town and the nation because of all the candidates running and what they are standing on. But we have some results here with 39.78% of the vote, that is according to the Associated Press. David Crowley is officially the Democratic nominee in the Wisconsin governor's race. He just edged out Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong by less than half a percentage point, and Hong did eventually concede. AP called these results right around 2:30 a.m., and we had been waiting and waiting and waiting. Rob, this one was close.
Yeah. Why would we expect that like the most chaotic primary in Wisconsin history would not end with a wild ending?
That's so fair. That is so fair.
And the election was not without hiccups. According to the New York Times, roughly 20,000 Democratic absentee ballots from Milwaukee were delayed due to human error. I guess the flash drives holding the election results that were supposed to hold the election results had the required audit information, but not the actual results. Ballots were just reported around 2:30 a.m., increasing Crowley's lead by just under 4,000 votes.
Hey, it's always these absentee ballots that get us. Wisconsin, yep. We got to get it together here. I should note that because this race was so close, it was within the margins for a recall. But since Hong did concede, that won't be necessary. That won't be happening. And like you said, Rob, it has been a chaotic primary for the Democrats over here, from the rapid implosion of Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez's campaign to the last minute sudden and honestly pretty vague exit from the race by Mandela Barnes. Like, it's been a lot to keep up with. And for folks, as a reminder, Crowley actually did suspend his campaign back in July. This was a big part of that chaos. But then just over a week later, he jumped back in the race and hit the ground running with Governor Tony Evers in arms. And he has been a massive fundraiser from the start. He always had a lot of money in the bank, and he managed to outraise Francesca Hong in July and overall. So these past few weeks clearly paid off for him.
Yeah, so much drama. I think political watchers will be sort of dissecting what happened here. I think they're looking at maybe one of two things happening, or maybe a little bit of both. As you know, the polling before the election showed Hong with a pretty commanding lead, which seemed to be way off, which is what happened last week in Michigan in the race for the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate race. The Democratic Socialist candidate there, Abdul El Sayed, also had a commanding lead over Congressperson Hayley Stevens, but in the election, it was like less than a point apart. So something seems off, I think, with primary polling in general, perhaps. But then the other thing everybody was talking about was, as you said, it was such a chaotic race, and it seemed like maybe establishment Democrats finally coalesced behind Crowley after kind of going back and forth between different candidates. So
yeah, it really was. It is the battle of the underdog and the establishment. At least that is how it has been framed in a lot of places. But I will say, that label is something that Crowley has pushed back on. I want to talk about a couple of the other candidates in the field because it's still been a lot. Within this crowded field, it ended up, like you said, Rob, really being a showdown between Hong and Crowley. Hong was always pulling ahead, but one thing that we don't really talk about is the amount of undecided voters who are still in those polls. It really does come down to them, and we saw this with Crowley's very, very slim win here. So the other candidates in the running, Kelda Roys, she came in third with about 7.5%, while Joel Brennan finished with just under 5% of the vote. So with Crowley's win, he will be facing off against Congressman Tom Tiffany in November. Tiffany beat his challenger, Andy Mansky, pretty early on in the night. I remember AP called that race very, very quickly because he took home more than 95% of the vote. I will say, Andy Mansky, we talk about long shot candidates. He was definitely a long shot candidate. I appreciate him both, though, for coming on our show and for keeping the race competitive. You gotta love a wild card, gotta love someone who wants to keep the people on their toes.
Tom Tiffany, there's still time to come on the podcast now.
Please. When it comes to the two candidates, Tiffany and Crowley, Tiffany is endorsed by President Donald Trump and backed by the Republican Party of Wisconsin. Crowley, with his support from Tony Evers, has been dubbed the quote-unquote establishment candidate on the Democratic side, but that's a label that he's really pushed back on, especially in this primary, and has been trying to shake. I wonder if that is going to be a different story as we move into the general, because as we know, Wisconsin is a very purple state. So that can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. That Trump endorsement, that can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. As a reminder, Wisconsin went for Trump in 2016, Biden in 2020, then back for Trump in 2024. So Wisconsin always going to keep you on your toes no matter what. And at the end of the day, Democrats here are really hoping to clinch a legislative trifecta in November. So meaning they have control of the House, Senate, and gubernatorial offices. They'd only need to flip just 2 of 4 competitive seats in the Senate to get that majority. But the Assembly is a bit harder. Republicans have a 54-45 advantage there. So this is a big goal of theirs, but one that's going to be hard to accomplish for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've had Republican control of the legislature for over a decade right now at this point. So Democrats are really champing at the bit to finally take control of at least one chamber.
And we'll see if they can do it. All right. Well, we have more races to discuss. But before we do, let's take a quick break. All right, we are back. And Rob, you have the results for the 76th Assembly District seat. That is the seat that is currently held by Francesca Hong.
Yeah, this one got decided substantially earlier before we went to bed last night, which is nice. Thank you. With all precincts reporting, Madison Alder Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford is the Democratic nominee for the 76th Assembly District. She will face off against Republican candidate Nina Chat, although this is a Democratic stronghold, this district, so Martinez Rutherford is pretty much expected to win that race. The last time a Republican ran for that seat was in 2022, and they ended up getting just under 12% of the vote. And this would be a history-making election if Martinez Rutherford won. she would be the first openly transgender person to serve ever in the Wisconsin state legislature.
Shout out to Dina Nina. She is currently serving on Madison City Council as the alder for District 15, which I guess, is she also having a David Crowley moment? Because do you remember, Rob, back for her city council race, she dropped out and then the people voted her in. And so she took office.
No, I was there at that press conference when she was like, yeah, I guess I'm right. I guess I'm going back to the city council. And just amazing that was like, a year and a half ago. And now she's the front runner for the state legislature race.
Yeah. And as a reminder for folks, this district covers much of the Isthmus and parts of North and East Madison. It used to cover basically the entirety of the Isthmus, but shifted eastward following the 2020 redistricting cycle. So now it's got a little bit more of those east and north side coverage. And this was also a really crowded field in the primary, and one that I really never knew which way it was going to go the whole time. It was also a very, very close race at the end of the day, too, between Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford, Juliana Bennett, and then not too far behind, Isaiah Benamy. All of these candidates ran on fairly similar platforms. So it was one that I was really kind of interested to see how it would shake out, especially because, there's no polling for these local district races. And so it really was just kind of like, who's got the best vibes here. So, I'm really curious to see what Dina Nina does with her time in the assembly. At least within recent history, this seat has really been a launch pad for progressive candidates, as seen with Francesca Hong, who just ran this massive gubernatorial campaign. And before her, Chris Taylor held the seat. And as we know, she now sits on the state Supreme Court.
Yeah, like you said, it was not a blowout. I mean, several candidates did very well. I mean, like I said, just to run the numbers, Martinez Rutherford won with 29.4% of the vote, but then right behind her was former alder Juliana Bennett, who had 27% of the vote. And then Isaiah Benamy had 21.8%. Tony Castaneda received 15.3% of the vote, and Zoe Sullivan got 6.3% of the vote. So it was pretty spread around. And I remember watching a candidates forum, and there was not a lot of daylight between the five of them. I mean, they were very unified on what they wanted to do if they became a state legislature. So, it's really interesting and was a real surprise.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, when I was talking to my friends about this race, because, a lot of them live within the 76, I was like, a lot of these candidates are pretty similar. So I really encourage you to do the research on just the people, right? Who do you want to represent you? Because they all have very different backgrounds. Dina Nina is not coming from a real formal political background. Yes, she is currently sitting on city council, but, both Juliana and Isaiah have that legislative experience as staffers in the Capitol. And so, Dina Nina, she really highlighted her service industry background, her working class background. She highlighted her identity as a transgender woman here in Wisconsin. So I guess that was something that really spoke to people in this race and worked out for her. I think it's something that we kind of saw similarly with Francesca Hong, who played up her service industry background. I'm not a traditional politician background, kind of that wild card. I don't think Dina Nina played herself as a wild card for sure, but it's all about what you can do to stand out in these really close races.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we've got still more races to cover. It is just around the corner. But first, we're going to take another quick break. All right, we're back. And believe it or not, there are more election results to get into. There were, as we know, a bunch of other statewide and other local races on the ballots that folks sounded off on in this primary. So I will kick us off here where incumbents held on to their nomination. On the Democratic ticket, U.S. Representative Mark Pocan beat his challenger Douglas Alexander. That was also by a pretty commanding margin. I know I saw some Pocan yard signs around my neighborhood, but he is someone who does not have to get out too much, I think, to get that nomination here. And meanwhile, even more local, Dane County Sheriff Calvin Barrett beat his challenger, Jack Ordman, who folks may or may not know, ran on essentially being this single issue candidate. He was a part of the protests over at Ridgeland Farms earlier this year. And that was a big piece of his candidacy was the fact that he did not like the sheriff's response to the whole Ridgeland Farm situation. And that's what sparked him to run. Ultimately, didn't work out. Calvin Barrett will move on to the general here.
On the Republican side, and the GOP had contested races for lieutenant governor, and David Varnum beat Will Martin. So Varnum will be on the ticket with Tiffany. And for Secretary of State, Jay Schroeder won in a crowded Republican primary that included Braden Meyer, Nate Polnow, and Cindy Werner. On the Democratic side, there was a contested race for state treasurer with Yi Leng-jong beating Dylan Ray Helmenstein. And what's really interesting about this race, talking about making history, is that if Zhang wins in November, he will be the first candidate of Hmong descent to win a statewide office, not just in Wisconsin, but in the entire United States, which is super cool.
Wow, that is huge. I didn't know that. Especially in a state like Wisconsin and neighboring Minnesota that have really, really big Hmong populations, I would have expected us to have had some representation sooner.
Surprising, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Surprising. Yeah. And two, we should note that, of course, Crowley getting that nomination, if he wins in November, he would be Wisconsin's first Black governor. And so it's cool to see all of these firsts happening here. That's the fun thing about elections and seeing how we change over time. I was looking into some of these smaller state races, and I'm not going to lie, I really did not know what the Secretary of State for was responsible at the state level, because at the federal level, you're like, yeah, they fly around and they do the schmoozing, they do the wining and dining with foreign dignitaries, hopefully they keep us out of war. But like, what does that look like at the state level? Rob, did you know what a Secretary of State was?
No, and that's funny because I think in other states the Secretary of State administers elections, right? So that's a pretty powerful position, but that's not the case in Wisconsin.
Yes, exactly. So the position is currently held by Sarah Godlewski, who we should note is now the Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor. So she will be out campaigning with David Crowley for that November general election. But the TLDR on the Wisconsin Secretary of State is, according to their website, the office is responsible for, quote, delivering important services to Wisconsinites and businesses, advancing economic development, facilitating international opportunities, increasing civic engagement, and strengthening democracy. So those are a lot of big words, right?
I mean, it sounds really important. It sounds like a big job.
It is, right? It really is. So it's a big job. The office, they deal with international documents. So it is the only state agency in Wisconsin that can authenticate documents that would be accepted by foreign countries for things like expanding a Wisconsin business overseas or adopting a child outside of the U.S. The Secretary of State in Wisconsin also chairs the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands, which is a $1.4 billion school trust fund that provides money for public schools and also finances community projects across the state. And you mentioned elections. The Wisconsin Secretary of State does not administer our elections here. We have the Wisconsin Elections Commission, the WEC, but they do play a role in some of the admin parts of elections. They're keeping track of documents and whatnot. So there is a little bit of overlap there, but yeah, elections are not under the secretary's belt here in Wisconsin.
This is a real the more you know segment, Hayley. I'm really appreciating learning about what the Secretary of State in Wisconsin does.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for, right? This was a big learning opportunity for me. You know, I never really knew that much about state government. Gonna out myself here. I've always been more of a local government reporter, so city council, Dane County Board. But I'm ready to put my statewide hat on because we are now headed into the general. It is not over. We are going all the way to the state house, and we're going to keep covering all of this election news until you guys are sick of it. Are you ready, Rob?
We're never getting sick of it. I mean, yeah, I don't think Wisconsin is either. I think this is just this is entering the main event phase here.
That's so true. Wisconsin really is the it girl when it comes to elections, whether it's the federal or even within our own state. We love to keep people on their toes. This has been so fun, Rob. Thank you for making this 4 a.m. adventure a little bit more bearable.
Yeah, I'm going to go find some breakfast pizza.
That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm executive producer Hayley Sperling, filling in for your host, Bianca Barton. Don't forget, you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor. Just head to membership.citycast.fm/Madison. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode? We worked very, very hard to make it for you. You can share it with someone who voted or who cares about their civic duty and is ready to do this all over again in November. Let's go, y'all. Help spread the word about CityCast Madison. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city, but until then, take good care and thanks for listening.